Welcome back. I'm Connie Silko, your host of Call to Create, and today I am so delighted to be able to talk with our very own Alexis and Chanté. Thank you, ladies, for being with us today.
We're so
Absolutely.
excited.
So great. I know these ladies from different touch points along the way, and they are wonderful. We're going to be talking today about what do you do when you have a difficult, sensitive topic, or you have difficult audiences, or you have both of those together. How do you get this message that you feel compelled to share, get it across, and in such a good, positive, impactful way? So let me give you the official bio, and we'll jump right in. Alexis and Chanté are mothers, wives, activists, motivational speakers, and innovators. Together, these two sisters have created impactful platforms, Sinclair Consulting and Let's Talk Sis. Each platform fulfills their mission to create more human connection, transformational conversations, and intentional change. They seek to bring awareness to difficult topics related specifically to race, diversity, and human connection through their unique framework for humanizing diversity, equity, and inclusion. Alexis, whose background is in sociology, and Chanté, whose background is in psychology, have 20 years experience training in the corporate, educational, and nonprofit sector, both nationally and internationally. Alexis and Chanté advocate for DEI training to youth, schools, communities, and businesses. So let's jump right in, ladies, because this is a hot button topic. And we were talking a little bit earlier, and like you were saying, it hasn't always been so hot button, right? But where did this sort of start back in the day that either what you saw or experienced started bringing this really forefront to your mind?
Well, I feel like growing up in a predominantly white area, being Black biracial, our father is Black, our mother is white, European ancestry. We had to learn how to have this conversation at a very young age. We got a lot of questions. There was a lot of curiosity. Sometimes we could even feel that there may be feelings. And we had to recognize that as children. And I think what we were trying to do, and we probably didn't even realize it, as young girls, is we were trying to create spaces of belonging and help people maybe understand our family history. So for us, this is a conversation that is very near and dear to our hearts and that we've been having our entire lives.
That's incredible. And especially at such a young age, not having particular tools, but instinctively being able to share as children do, which is so beautiful. Being able to share those things, innocently and just sort of factually, I would imagine, as how you felt in your experience. Anything you want to add on, Shantae?
Well, I would say that the work of diversity, equity, and inclusion really was born out of a need, and in 2020, it really was propelled forward. There was so much racial tension and racial divide. And so we've seen the last few years of this work really, really growing. And to be really honest with you, everyone does it a little bit differently, and because we're seeing so many different ways of executing this work, we see a lot of feelings and there are change happening rapidly. And Alexis and I have really made a commitment that when we step into the realm of diversity, equity, inclusion, it is about humanity. It is about prioritizing people first, having conversations, opening doors to connection. And I know that, like I said, it's done differently in different places by different practitioners. And so I do think we see some pushback against it, some fear. What is this going to look like for me? It's a lot.
Yes. And I can only imagine when you go into a group and there's all these different experiences people have had, negative and positive, and some are like, yeah, that's not a big deal. And others are, it's just so, they've had such negative experiences on all sides of the table. When you go back to what you shared as a child and even growing up, what were some of the things that you already gravitated to in humanizing this? What were some of the skills that you started to see? This helps, this works, this creates understanding.
Ooh, that's a really good question. And I feel like one of the things that I remember noticing is when I felt there was a door open with real intention, curiosity, humility, where we could have that conversation. And it was more of a perspective shift, where maybe we just needed to offer a different way to look at something. And then maybe where that door was closed. And I think that when we are showing up now and we're talking to different groups, organizations, businesses, companies, audiences, we in real time are having to kind of create a little bit of a bridge to build upon where we can neutralize it just enough and find commonalities. We really do see when we're not using shame or guilt, and we can recognize that everyone's coming from a different place, different lived experiences, and that's actually good. And we want that, and we can secure that and prioritize that right up front. Then we feel like there is some place to go together. But it is hard, and it's hard to do in real time. And especially currently with so many different political views and feelings, it makes it sometimes feel like such a challenge. But we've continued to show up. And I feel like when we can ask people to trust us and go with us a little bit, most cases people do. And it is a really cool experience.
I love that. And it sounds like you're doing a lot of validation at first, helping that validation of their life experiences, and then maybe leading to a little bit more awareness of what this is, what it looks like, what it can feel like. Chanté, anything you want to add?
Well, I was just going to, second what Alexis said is that when we find those connections, that common ground, and when we can validate that everyone experience matters and it's part of this story, and that there can be duality. I can have an experience, you can have an experience, and those two can coexist if we're able to communicate and to connect.
Yes. And it sounds like so much of it is about, again, helping someone to understand and put dialogue, put words to that experience that they had. Because if they've had a negative experience, that means there's fear, there's distrust, there's trauma even. But if you're able to give them tools of words or reframe it or help them to understand what may have happened from a couple of different sides, then I think that opens up to that vulnerability. Would you say?
Yes. And I feel like the vulnerability and the research on vulnerability is very important in the conversations that we're having. And I love that you brought that up.
That's, I wanted to kind of tune into that for a minute, because those that are listening, if they've got, whether it's in their art or movies, films that they're making, I interviewed Molly Bonner, and he was talking about getting that movie made. His name is Greenflake, and the different things that all went into that, and what faith steps he had to take, and that he said, but this dialogue, this needed to happen, and the Lord wanted this to happen. So it's almost like you both feel called to do this. When did you know that this was something you needed to step up into and actually talk about, like make it a thing?
Oh,
I think that's layered. I think there have been a number of things throughout our lives because truthfully, our work in this realm started long before our business in 2020, and both Alexis and I have felt called, I think, on different levels. For me, I had a very scary racial experience back in 2018 that I think was an eye opener for me to realize how much work needs to be done. And then, truthfully, as Alexis and I have lived this parallel life as sisters and best friends, and had so much in common, marrying a white man, Alexis marrying a black man, I saw a great disparity as we stepped into motherhood. And she's raising 4 beautiful black children, and my children are white assuming. And I felt like watching this process play out, I was overcome by the disparity that we were experiencing. And I think Alexis really hasn't, I'll let her speak for herself, but I've watched her step into situations because of a need, because she has to protect her children and she has to have conversations. And for me, that was a call to action. Oh my goodness. I have the privilege to choose when to step in and step out. And I better choose to step in because this is about a safer world and community for our children.
I love that. And that, knowing most creatives can go back to a moment where they feel like I was called. You know what I mean? Even if they didn't want to do it. Sorry, I don't know why it's making me a little bit tender, but even when you don't want to do it. And I think that's prophets of every dispensation, sort of like, really? No, really. There's probably 20 people I could recommend that would be super great for this, right? But you've been called to the work because of those experiences, and they usually involve something painful. And it's taught us to such a level that we feel we're compelled to speak. Alexis, did you want to share?
Yes, I feel like there have been several situations that have made me feel very called to this, but it is a wrestle because I don't want to do it. I want to live in a world where we can feel and see each other in a way that doesn't have some of these barriers. And sometimes it's so exhausting. And the more stories that we hear and the people that even come to us in desperate moments, thinking that we can help, sometimes it feels very heavy when we're trying to raise our children and, just all of the responsibilities that we carry. But I do feel like when Chanté and I did a little interview in 2020, and that then translated over to an Instagram account just because the host of the interview said, where can we follow you if we want to continue this conversation? And we, in that moment, thought, we don't have anything. We have our private accounts with pictures of our children. So I quickly made this account called Let's Talk Sis. And within 2 days, we had 7,000 followers. And I felt that we've been doing this work quietly, but I felt in that moment that there was a purpose and a need, and maybe even divine intervention of saying, here's a bigger platform and I need you to do it a little bit bigger. And I felt like we stepped into that and it continued to grow. And there has been so much momentum that we can't say it's anything but. It's more than just by chance. Like, we feel that calling, but at the same time, I think we both are very honest and we say, are we done? Are we done? Because there's so many things that we would love to do or even not do. But we felt that it continues and it's taken different shapes in different forms and different doors have been opened, but it's still ultimately the same thing that we really started doing publicly in 2020.
That's incredible. And when I look at that, I just think about how that unfolds. And that's not just for this dialogue, it's for any sensitive topic. You think about divorce, me, when I'm talking about being a divorced woman, LGBTQ, all these different facets and different slices of the pie. That as we move that dialogue forward, we see what happens when it's done with love. I remember Molly Bonner talking about when he was talking with the members of the Quorum, the 12, and they were discussing, the monuments for green flag and things like that. And they said, it feels like love. It feels like love. And I think you both do that so well that there's this feeling of love and, like you said, human connection. And how do we come together, not with an agenda, but just seeing each other as people right at the core. And I think that translates so beautiful in your Instagram account. And that's what I love. I want to talk about how you've been able to navigate this topic where some people come at it very professional and we need to have it like this and kind of in a box. And you're more like sitting on the couch talking and putting it in layman's terms of this is what this term means. This is what this thing could look like. This is what this perspective could be. How has that helped people understand? Have you found that way of going about it, or what have been some of the benefits of doing it that way in a more kitchen table way?
When we first started, some of the earliest feedback that we were hearing is people were saying, this is so complicated. Either these terms are too academic or it gets political way too fast that I'm overwhelmed and I just don't even know what to say. So when we're hearing people are opting out of these conversations with their children because it feels too complicated, our first goal was, how could we make this accessible? And honestly, our Instagram account started, how to teach your children. And so we learned quickly that by giving people these really accessible ways that were simple to teach their children, that's actually the level that most people needed it at. We were teaching the parents, and the parents, that was the level that they needed it. And then they felt like they could go in and have conversations with their children better. And so it really, I don't know if it was kind of an accident at first, but our first goal was really, we want families to have these conversations.
Love it. Chanté?
Well, I was just going to say, with our focus of connecting, we have to use a language and a level of communication that is easy to take in, that doesn't make you feel stressed or overwhelmed, and just like Alexis said, when we were trying to think through these concepts together and say, how would we explain this to our 6-year-old or to our 8-year-old. And truthfully, Alexis and I were practicing this in real time. We would have a conversation about one of these topics, and then I would go to my 6-year-old at the time and talk to him about it. And he would be like, well, this doesn't make sense. And I would have to think, okay, how do I explain this? And then we would go to our social media platform and talk to these parents because this was tried and true. We had already gone through that process, and we just realized, if we're trying to connect and we are trying to make this something that anyone feels comfortable having the conversation in their home, it has to be in this, I don't want to necessarily say gentle language, but a language that communicates love. I really think that was the foundation of it.
Yes. And I feel like, and even for those listening, if they have sensitive topics they're covering, when there is a feeling of love and when there is a sort of, and I know there's a better word than factual approach, but it's a very sort of, this is this and that is that. If there's no hidden agenda or anything, it's just, this is the thing. And I find that makes someone more receptive. You don't feel this agenda or there's a hidden tether somewhere. You're just saying, this is this, that is that. What's your thoughts on it? What's your experience about it? And people really do feel seen and heard. So I can see that you have both, this has been years of making this approach and this intention about how to get this across. I want to talk about when you're with people who are not receptive, because there are people who are going to be moving forward a difficult or sensitive agenda, and they're going to have to deal with a difficult audience. Have you had an experience where it was a difficult audience and you had to navigate that? And how did you do that?
I think we've had a number of experiences.
Yes.
Fun.
Lex, go ahead.
Well, it's in real time, like it takes so much like emotional work because we are coming in and we know, we've even been told when people hear what we're talking about and see us, there's a reaction. And we actually even went to one company and they told us after they had a really positive experience with us. And after they admitted that when they saw us coming, someone pretty high up in the company said, oh, there's those two Black women pushing that DEI crap. And I mean, the opinion changed, but honestly, I was so thankful that they told us that because that is what people think. That really is what so many people think, that when we're walking in, and it's not just on that end of the spectrum, there's honestly people that think they're too gentle, they're too loving, they need to be more direct. And it is really a journey because we do believe in direct conversations that are humanizing with psychological safety and love. But we do believe that there is a certain amount of directness needed, but we also have to start somewhere and end somewhere.
Yes.
And I feel like we can see in real time, based on facial expressions, nods, shaking of heads, where people are. And so really the way we've built our principles and our trainings is to try to really create safety at the very beginning and neutralize the topic and let people know that actually different lived experiences, different even political views are needed and wanted. And part of creating a space of safety and belonging is allowing for all of that to exist. And we're not trying to necessarily change someone's opinion, but we do want to create some deeper connections and understandings. And honestly, as humans, we never want to just sit with our own thoughts and perspective. And we always should want to challenge that because it does connect us deeper to people and gives us a new perspective. And we share different stories and experiences. And in the beginning, we try to, I don't know, kind of lighten it a little bit so that then we can take people on a deeper journey.
And that is so crucial. I remember when we invited you to come speak at the BYU Management Society, and you are speaking to a room full of 200, generally speaking, over 60 white male businessmen, right? And I remember it was such a push the envelope conference. I didn't feel like there was an atmosphere of like pushing back on you or negativity. I just felt like it was almost like, in my opinion, there was just a feeling of sort of apathy. We're going to endure this. We're going to sit through it, right? And you know what? It was incredible to me The way that you set things up and opened this, there was discussion, there was openness. There were men who were in tears, raising their hand, asking questions, sharing thoughts. And I watched this happen right before my eyes, that a room was transformed of men who arguably have been statistically shown to be not the most open. That's not those listening. I know. I'm just saying that that's, that kind of experience. And I watched it happen and I thought, that's the power of approach. And these keys that you're talking about, bridging, awareness, emotional, psychological awareness and safety, validation, and then being able to open up to experiences and then humanizing it. All of these things matter in moving a sensitive subject forward. So I saw that for myself. Chanté, can you think of an experience where you've been able to make a difference in a situation that was maybe a little hot?
Alexis and I had an opportunity to train. It was another situation, kind of like what you talk about, Connie, where it was just a group of older all white males, and it wasn't that intense pushback, but we could just feel the energy of, okay, we're getting paid to be here, let's get through this, let's move forward. And it was interesting because our goal is always, if I can see you and you can see me, we can move someplace together. And your story matters, my story matters. And Alexis and I, we choose vulnerability when we train, and we tell a lot of stories that are personal and sensitive to us. And typically that really kind of shifts the energy in the room. But in this case, it wasn't. There was more to it. There were some deep feelings. And I remember Alexis stopped the whole conference and said, I'm just going to address the elephant in the room right now. And she just said, as white males, you are feeling like there's not a place for you right now. You're feeling fear. You're feeling pushed out. And we want you to know that's not our goal. And we talked a little bit about how historically we've had this human hierarchy, and there are people who would like to flip that hierarchy and put the people who were at the top historically, to put them at the bottom. And we wanted to diffuse that space in that room by saying, our goal is not to flip anything. Our goal is to get rid of a hierarchy at all, to say every human perspective, experience, life story matters. And you're part of that. You're part of this conversation. Diversity, inclusion, this includes you. And there were tears. And just to see these men, to address their fears and to see them in that moment shifted everything.
Oh, that is gorgeous. And that's what we saw in that conference. I love that you bring it back to that humanizing and then giving people opportunity to experience things differently. Because in those rooms, that group of men were still, in essence, behaving somewhat in that same expected way. But you went deeper to the reason why, then addressed it, then showed vulnerability, then showed opportunity for them to be able to see it in a different light, and took away that fear and provided that safety. And what a huge important factor to do, whether it's in an audience, whether it's at a business meeting, whether it's in your own family, being able to provide that environment. This is what matters. This is that connector piece of seeing each other as valid, as our experiences are valid, and that it actually adds to our life experience. We need, like you said, we need those in order to have that full experience that we all want to have. I know that our time is short. Did you have anything else you wanted to add really quickly?
Well, I just wanted to say, in that particular situation, which was so fascinating because you could feel the tension in the room, is once we really got to the root, the vulnerability of those men was incredible. And I felt like our hearts were so touched, and we learned from them of understanding this feeling of, they are kind, compassionate men, and they feel that they are viewed a certain way, and being able to make that connection. That was also a connection that we were trying to make with some of the points that we were talking about. And you just saw all these beautiful bridges just of connection back and forth. And it was honestly one of the most beautiful experiences that I think either of us have ever had, where we walked away just like, oh my goodness, that started so hard. And it ended in such a beautiful, vulnerable place. And I just still, if I were to see some of those men out and about, I'd hug him. Like it was
Yes.
just such a cool experience. Yes.
Oh my goodness. And at that conference, like afterwards, I was listening to pockets of conversation. And here was this one state president who had raised his hand in tears of things that he had not understood. And here these pockets of conversation. You know what? I can do this. I can do that. Listening to how quickly these men who have been categorized as being inflexible, how quickly they were able to shift that perspective and move on it. That was so powerful to me. And again, this is likening it to any other group that seems to be maybe somewhat inflexible or not maybe perceived as being as malleable or as open to new ideas. And I think that's to me such a crux of moving our callings forward. We're always going to have pushback somewhere, this call to create. And that's why it's hard. And that's why there's those moments of lots of moments. I don't want to do this. Somebody else can do this so much better. Please give it to them. But the Lord has asked us to do our part. And it doesn't mean that suddenly, globally, everything's going to change. But it does mean we have opened another door. And that means another door can open and another door. So all of this is so vital. Let's pull it back to that one individual. I remember you were sharing an experience, Alexis, and if I've got this wrong, you let me know. You were sharing about driving with your husband and he got pulled over and watching him shift, that this strong, wonderful, amazing man who he is a love, amazing man, and he's a big guy, how he just went subservient and went quiet and you were like, who is this person? I don't even know. Do you want to talk about that for a minute of what you learned from that? Because I learned so much from that of how I can respond.
Yes. Well, and I think that this is where I can give a lot of grace to people coming into this conversation is even my experiences growing up in Utah were very different than my husband's experiences being Black in the South. And some of the things that he had to learn, even for safety, even the things that his mother taught him, it was different than how Chanté and I had to navigate as lighter skinned, mixed race Black women. So I believe that when I started seeing this and having these experiences, first of all, I was horrified. I couldn't even believe it. But when I saw my husband have to shift and change from who I believe he inherently is to be able to, in a situation, navigate it with the end goal being safety, it was something that I had never fully seen close up. And if you would have told me, which, mind you, I did major in sociology, we talked about these things. We talked about discrimination. We talked about historically some of the connection with even police. Like I learned so many of these things in school, but seeing it up close, I remember even having conversations with my husband and sometimes disagreeing with him because I hadn't seen that. That was not my experience. And then quickly in marriage, starting to have, and it wasn't just one or two experiences, it was several. And it kept happening that I thought, what in the world is going on here? And I remember with one of the situations where I actually called the chief of police after because I was so horrified. And I talked to him and he did say, he said, ma'am, he said, I'm so sorry. I'm sure that your husband is a great person, but you have to understand that we have to train our officers to look at some of these things like race, stature, all of these things and make these quick snap judgments. And that was so hard for me to hear because in my mind, I thought, oh my goodness, this man is a man that is just such a man of God. He is everything that I felt like people didn't see or were treating him in that situation, that he was being treated like a criminal. I felt like he was being dehumanized. And it was so awful to witness and see, but then to have this conversation and recognize in that moment that it was so much bigger. This was history that was so far beyond our experiences, but it still affected us here today in this moment and those beliefs and those views. And I felt so helpless in that situation. And I never wanted to feel helpless like that again. But I also knew it was so much bigger than me. And I feel like those are some of the opportunities that I witnessed. And I can see now that even the opinions I had in the beginning, I wish so badly that I could have listened to my husband's experiences and believed him without having to witness and see some of these things. So when I sit in rooms of people that have lived a very insulated life, where they maybe haven't had proximity to different groups, different socioeconomic status, different religions, I have to hold space, because I know that I can see that I, at one point, before my eyes were able to really expand and see, that I had some of those limiting views also. And so I do feel for people. And I also feel a lot of even guilt still, where I can see a whole world and so many worlds where if I just apply my own view and experience, I will miss so much. And I hope that through that, I can help people recognize that it is so important that we can see past that, and we can sit with someone else and mourn with someone else and believe someone else, because we all experience the world differently.
I so appreciate you bringing that up, and in such a good way, that when you shared that with me, that opened my eyes. I love this awareness. When you open your eyes, then you can exercise more compassion, more openness, more willingness to understand somebody else's experience. And that, bringing it back to that person, I remember talking with you before and saying, what's a good way to respond if there is a moment of something happened that is racially or discriminatory, it's inappropriate. And I think some of us would either not say anything, or some of us go charging in. And I remember you saying to me, I'm glad you asked, because there have been experiences where someone has charged in with the right intent of saying, this is not okay. And it just blew the situation up. So I know this is so hard to just give an across the board thing, but is there a tool that people can use, whether it's a divorcee, or whether it's someone who's had infertility, or whether it's someone who's LGBTQ or whatever? There's a situation that is inappropriate, or it's difficult, or whatever, and you want to help. Is there any tool that you can give that would be like, this is generally a good way to go about it?
I love that question,
Yeah.
first of all, because I think we have such good intentions, and sometimes we can do just a little bit of harm because we're so eager, to help. And I would say sometimes it's really good to just pause for a minute and to try and shift perspective. If I'm the person maybe being targeted, or something harmful or negative was said, do I want that highlighted in front of everyone? How would I want that navigated? And to see, there's usually a person who's been harmed or affected, and to try and stand in their shoes for a minute and to say, how can I offer them the most safety and the most grace in this moment, so that they can step out of this situation with less harm done? Our goal is always to really encompass in safety and love. And so I think to pause and to think through it is so helpful, because every situation is different. And I don't believe that there's necessarily, okay, first you do this, and then you do this, and then you do this. It's that we have to see that person, and we have to make a decision that we feel like is best in that moment, whether it's quietly going later, whether it's talking directly to that person. Can I help? How can I support you? That would be my advice.
That's beautiful. And I think that first step of see that person, try to put yourself in their shoes. What fear must they be experiencing, or what experiences that they possibly had for them to say or do what they're saying or doing, and putting yourself in the person's that's receiving, if it's somebody else that you're watching. Alexis, any thoughts?
Yes, I think Chanté gave two really good examples too, because we've been in situations. Actually, we spoke at a conference, and after, there was someone that came up to us, and it was some really inappropriate conversation. And we felt like we had it handled, but some other women were watching, and they were very offended for us. And they they didn't necessarily interrupt, but after, they did say, hey, we could tell that was absolutely inappropriate. First of all, we're so sorry. And second of all, we talked to the person in charge of the conference, and we gave them some feedback just about, even after speakers speak, maybe managing those who come up to them afterwards and some of the things that are said, so they can have a little more support. And I thought it was handled so well, because Chanté and I really, if a whole group of women would have come up and tried to intervene, that would have been a lot. But after, to know that we were able to hold a boundary with a person, and then we also could see that other people saw that, and we felt very validated. But then they had taken an approach of saying, we gave feedback to the conference as a whole. We felt like, wow, that was so great. And now that's something that we actually don't have to do. But we have seen experiences too, where sometimes you do need that courage in the moment to interrupt what is going on. And especially when it's a child, that is where I have seen, even if it is just helping remove the person from the situation so there can be a conversation. And then if you need to go into that into another conversation with maybe the person that said something harmful, we always teach in our trainings to assume the best. So we say, from based on what I know about you, I know that you would never want to make someone feel less than, but there was something that you said that because I care, I wanted to give you some feedback on that. But then we also are making sure that we are not speaking for someone else that doesn't want to be spoken for. There's so many little parts and pieces to it, but we do believe that direct conversation, acknowledging it, and then asking the person that maybe something was said to or about how they want it handled, and then playing a supportive role. That's huge. And that supporting role can look different. Maybe they do want you to say something. Maybe they just needed the validation and they want to say something. There's so many different layers and parts, but when we're sensitive and we can communicate, then we can move forward doing the least amount of harm. And I think Chanté said it so well. And we do in our trainings, we talk a little bit about like the Hippocratic Oath. And that's really our goal, is we're trying so hard to show up with love and healing. And I do feel like that sometimes healing, it can be worse before it gets better. Sometimes it can get really ugly and hard. And then sometimes you start seeing those layers start really coming together, and you can feel that strength that comes from healing, but it is not always a beautiful, perfect situation. And those of us who've healed it, we know that even from a gaping wound or surgery, sometimes it is harder before it gets better.
Absolutely. You've got to lance the boil sometimes, and then before it's going to be able to release and heal.
You have to clean it out. Yeah.
I love this point, and especially when you bring up children, being able to keep children safe. I think that's a really huge part. And I love that you bring up, ask the person. When in doubt, ask the person either afterwards, if they're not in harm's way, right? Afterwards, say, I saw this, I felt this, I would love to support you. I remember one of my sons, he had a teacher who was bullying him. I was ready to go down to the school, and I mean, just, put the hammer down. And he was like, don't. He said, I can take care of this, but don't. I said, well, if you get to a place where you don't feel you can, you need to tell me, and I am ready at a moment's notice. But it killed me to not go and advocate for him. But he said, it will be worse for me if you do that. And he found his own way to solve that. But again, it's trusting the person and trusting the process, even if you think there's a better way to go about it. That I love that respect of that person being able to say what's best for you. I know that this has been it's been a gorgeous conversation, and I have loved the tips and the tools that you've shared. And hopefully those that are listening, and anything that we share in our message, there's going to be those hot button moments, and being able to utilize some of these tools to make that happen. I know there's going to be people who want to know more and connect more with you ladies. What is the best way for them to reach you?
It would be right now through our Instagram, Let's Talk Sis. We get a lot of people that are interested, just want to engage in conversation, want us to come and speak at a conference, want to know what our next workshop is, want ideas of children's books and movies. And we feel like that's just the best way that we can connect, and that we can direct people from there, because we do have a different way to contact us for training and speaking versus more of the conversational parts and pieces that we do on Instagram.
I love that. And you can always DM them. That's fantastic. So anyway, great tips and tools today. So appreciate and love the work that you are doing. Wish you all the best in everything you do.
Thank you.
And for those that are listening, if you have loved this interview, we would encourage you to join us for the other interviews that we have. They are so fantastic. We have Dr. Stacey Taniguchi, we have Lisa Valentine Clark, Gerald Lund, Steve Young. We have all of these people in all these different fields that are sharing their journey and being called to create, to help you in fulfilling your journey of being called to create.